Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, or almost afternoon. It's that 11 o'clock hour. It always gets me. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started as people are joining. I'm Allison Kretzinger. I'm our Director of Public Affairs here at DCYF. I'm joined by my colleague, Renee Newkirk, our Chief Financial Officer. As is custom around this time of year, we get together and share the highlights and the impacts to DCYF in the governor's proposed budget. A few logistics and housekeeping as we get started this morning. There is a question and answer function available to you. Please feel free to use that to ask questions. Renee and I will respond to some of those live as we move. We may type answers in, or we may need to do some follow-up as we go. So feel free to use that function. The slides that you see today, as well as the recording, will be posted to the DCYF Government Affairs website after we conclude sometime, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next. So those are sort of the logistical pieces as we move. What we'll move through today is the highlights from the governor's budget and sort of realities as we head into the legislative session. So if we want to go ahead and go to the next slide. For folks who have joined us previously, this slide is probably becoming very familiar. Really is intended just to be a high-level overview of the intersection of state agencies. That's us, DCYF. The purple is the Office of Financial Management and the governor's office, and then green is the legislature. We're in that season where the governor has proposed his budget to the legislature, and next Monday, just in 4 short days, the legislature will be coming to town to begin their work. If we want to go ahead and go to the next slide, what does it mean this year for the legislature to come to town and start their work? Well, I've sort of summarized this season that we're in and this time. There's lots and lots and lots of change. We're experiencing a change in the governor's office for the first time in over a decade. We're experiencing change in the legislature with new members, a lot of shifting sand and members moving around, new seats, new opportunities, new careers, and new members coming in, new members of leadership as well in the legislature. We also are entering year 1 of a biennial session. So the way the Washington State Legislature works is every year they come to town and meet. In year 1 of the biennial budget setting session, that's this year, those are odd number years, it's a budget setting session. The legislature is going to contemplate and pass a budget that will then go to the governor for signature, that will then go into effect in July, that really governs the state operating budget for a couple of years. Historically, that means that long sessions are really the opportunity and the session to contemplate innovation, new things, change, as opposed to those short sessions or those supplemental sessions where it's really about tweaks, adjustments. They're only here for 60 days in those years. They're shorter. And so that's tends to historically how we like to think about sort of a long versus a short session and how they work together for that biennial. But the economic realities that we are all facing, and I'm going to turn it over to Renee to talk about the economic reality facing Washington State and the change that is for many of us who have been doing this work for a number of years.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, there's a lot of change, to say the least. We are in some challenging times, not to say that our state hasn't faced more challenging times than what is ahead of us, but it is challenging times. The state is faced with a projected $10 to $12 billion budget deficit heading into this biennium. But considering this, the governor's priorities in his proposed budget, this is not a comprehensive list to say the least, but just to highlight a few of the governor's priorities. In his budget, he really wanted to maintain access to existing programs, so ensuring that clients have the access that they have today, right-sizing funding for programs, ensuring funding is sufficient to respond to our legal requirements and obligations, and also to continue addressing the opioid crisis. The governor's proposed budget addresses the deficit by making some delays. Unfortunately, delays in program expansions or policy decisions, and also having to take reductions, but taking reductions that are the least harmful to the clients that we serve. But more needed to be done to address the deficit. So the governor's proposed budget also includes some new revenue. You may have heard it referred to as the wealth tax. The governor's budget proposes targeted taxation on multimillionaires and businesses in this state. Also, the Office of Financial Management has directed us to place a freeze on all non-essential hiring and purchases such as non-essential travel, non-essential contracts, equipment, etc. So anything non-essential, we are currently in a freeze until we hear otherwise. But in light of this, in light of the budget reality, in light of the budget deficit, we DCYF were very, very pleased with the outcome of the governor's proposed budget. We do see some new investment, which you'll hear about later on. Yes, there is some disappointment that not all things are funded, but that's just the reality. Given the budget deficit, not all things will be funded. So in light of that, we are very pleased with that. Allison, as I turn it over to her, she'll probably go through what we expect to see in the slides, but just wanted to note that this presentation today, we're stepping off of the agency's budget request known as our decision packages. So that's the format of this. And then you'll notice on the right corner, we've highlighted whether our request was fully funded or partially funded or maybe mostly funded. We are not going to be discussing and reviewing requests that weren't funded, although we have included those at the very end of the slide deck, which, as Allison noted, those will be posted on the Government Affairs DCYF website. So you can refer to those after this webinar session, which may not be up until Monday or so. So give us a little bit of time to finalize. You'll also notice as we walk through the slides, there's some strike-throughs. The strike-throughs indicate that the governor's proposed budget did not fund something. Again, we will not be speaking to that, but that's sort of what you'll see and notice on the slides. If you're wondering why there's a strike-through on the slide, that is why. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Allison, to kick us off here.
Thanks so much, Renee. Just really grounding in as DCYF submitted a series and a number of decision packages and agency request legislation at the outset of our timeline this year back in September, there were really 5 buckets that guided our work. Those are here for quick reference on our screen. And as we advance to the next slide, I want to reinforce something that Renee said as we were talking about this yesterday. This is a positive budget for DCYF, despite feeling very potentially very let down for some of the expectations we, others had. And I just want to call out that the dynamic tension of both of those things being true is where we're at. Many people are likely disappointed that they don't see, investments in big new things, but we're also very pleased as an agency in how DCYF's came out in this governor's budget. And I want to hold both those realities, and I want us all to challenge us all to hold both of those realities as we move through this conversation today. I see a couple of logistical questions coming in around the new governor adopting the governor's budget, and could the budget change when the new governor takes office? So maybe we'll set some context there, and then we'll sort of dive into the content here. The new governor will take office on the 15th. He'll be sworn in then, and that team will change. We do not expect to see the incoming governor roll out a different or new quote unquote proposed budget. It is likely we could see the incoming administration call out specific priorities that they want to focus on this legislation that may or may not already be included in what the current governor has proposed. And so that's what we expect to see. The reality is that at this point, it's really now going to turn to the legislative arena for contemplation of the biennial budget, and the incoming governor will certainly be part of that conversation, I would imagine, in very active ways. But we don't anticipate to see a different proposed budget from top to bottom that changes the authorizing deck for state agencies. We do expect the incoming governor to weigh in on where his priorities are, as he should. So that's sort of where we're at, and I want to reinforce that this is a proposed budget. None of this is law. None of this has passed. None of this is reality, including we'll talk about some of the potential proposed recommendations for reductions at the end. This is all proposed. It will now be up to the legislature to spend the next 110 days, 9 days in Olympia contemplating that and going through that. So great questions. I think it's really important to understand the context of what Renee and I are sharing today. So with that, I'm going to walk through some of the investments in the juvenile rehabilitation space. As Renee indicated, we're stepping off what we had submitted in our decision packages and sharing sort of what was funded of the decision packages we had submitted. So our first decision package in the juvenile rehabilitation space contemplates safety and security. It had a number of components, and what was funded in the governor's proposed budget was the resource, the staffing, and the support needed to stand up and launch the internal infractions unit, the restorative justice process, the hearings work that's underway. We really need to have capacity to have fidelity and quality for that internal infractions. That's really what that is. Alongside and related is additional staff to support robust, high-quality classification process. Right now, we have one JR staff person who oversees and manages the classification process, and really given the growing population and the complexity and nuance of classification, we know we need more resource to do that and do that well. And so you see some support there. In addition, you see investments in our video storage and privacy protection infrastructure. Lots more video being stored and recorded and stored. And so really need to have an infrastructure to do that, as well as the technology systems support, FTE, and people to do that well. And then you also see a continuation of some of the contracted security and the temporary security at Echo Glen that continues until that fence is completed, which the fence is on moving forward and expected to be completed at some point in early part of fiscal year 26. So I get confused, but it is fiscal year 26 and when we expect that to be completed. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next slide. So the other decision package in the JR space that had some funding attributed to it was the youth well-being. This was really about supporting that treatment and mental health treatment and well-being for young people. So we see investment in really focused on, as Renee talked about, the drug treatment prevention, opioid prevention, and drug treatment components of this package. So additional nurse and physician support for the MOUD, or medically assisted opioid use disorder treatment, counseling, case management, and delivery. DCYF is really proud, JR is really proud of the work we have done in drug treatment for young people who come into our care. And so we're really thrilled to see these investments, which will be able to continue expansion of those programs and ensure they're being done well and to quality. In addition, ongoing resource for the reentry focused opioid use disorder program. We've been part of a POST, or the Positive Outcomes Through Successful Transitions pilot, delivered in partnership with Seattle Children's. This will provide that ongoing funding to continue that POST, which is that drug treatment that goes with young people when they reenter and they leave our care and custody. We want to go ahead and go to the next slide. DCYF had put forward a placeholder. What does placeholder mean? Great question. I'll answer that. Placeholder means that we put forward a decision package saying, hey, we know we're going to need this thing, but we don't have all the details yet. We need a bit more time to understand what that thing is. So we put forward a placeholder that said we're going to need additional JR capacity. Numbers are growing. Green Hill is overcrowded and unsafe. Our numbers at Echo are also growing. We know we need additional JR capacity to do the work we are charged with doing. So that sort of has materialized into an initial ask around capacity that was funded by the governor's budget to build out the Emerging Adult Leaders Program located at Stafford Creek, a 48-bed JR run unit on that campus. I want to be really clear. We know that that's not enough capacity, and I imagine much more conversation with the legislature and the incoming administration around what else we need to be doing in the juvenile rehabilitation space to ensure there is adequate space, there's adequate capacity, care, treatment, et cetera, all of those pieces that folks have been hearing about and talking about, us included. But we are thrilled to see this capacity. This funding starts in this current fiscal year, with projected opening date for this facility to be sometime in the winter months, February, March timeframe. Additionally, the governor's budget does include direction for the agency to really be thoughtful in the planning and the continuum and the additional capacity needed, and directs us to do planning and report on what is necessary for the continuum and capacity. Go ahead and go to the next. So those are the JR operating budget elements that were funded. I'm going to talk a little bit about the capital investments at Echo and Green Hill, and then we'll pause and take questions related to the JR space that are coming in. So capital investments, we see capital investments at Echo Glen, including funding for parking near the campus. If folks have been out to Echo recently, parking is challenging. And so we need to reset and redo some of the parking entrance there. In addition, this is really technical, but deeply necessary. We need to have functional and high quality boiler and HVAC units. They need to be replaced. That happens. They happen in our homes. They happen in state-run buildings as well. So necessary there. In addition, the pre-design and construction cost estimation for a new family visit center. We need to update the visit space and capacity at Echo, given what we know about best practice connection to family, et cetera. So excited to launch that work. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We see capital investments at Green Hill and other parts of the continuum. Similar, we see investment in the modifying the entrance to ensure better entry up front there. So if you've been to Green Hill, there's scanners and it's crammed, and we really want to update that front entry and the flow there for visitors, for staff, for young people. Additional upgrades to HVAC necessary. Got to do it. Cost of doing business. Additionally, we see investment in the 6-year facilities master plan. So this is the resource that will help build out what is the master plan? This is really where we can contemplate population capacity, types of buildings, types of smaller community-based flexible facilities. Where should they be? How many do we need? So really building out that next series of the 6-year master plan. The previous master plan was done before the JR to 25 laws went into effect. And so it's absolutely time to update that and have a more robust view of what is needed in the long term. Additionally, there's a whole list of minor works that need to be done. I think about it as sort of the to-do list when you're in your home every year. What needs to be done? This vent, that gutter, this light socket, this paint. So a whole list of minor works things across the JR continuum, both at Echo Glen, Green Hill, and across the community facilities that are funded, that are necessary. So that's a summary of the JR space. I'm going to pause and turn to the JR questions before we pivot into the prevention and child welfare spaces. What is the plan to address discharge if planners not funded? I think this is about the reentry support. So JR has a practice around reentry and reentry planning, and more to come there on continuing that work. That work will continue within the resources we have available to do that work. What would be considered enough adequate capacity given the current state of overcrowding at JR? Jake, great question. We will follow up with you. I'm not prepared to speak to those numbers today online. And then can you talk around the DP item around pre-release reentry planning that did not get included? What was the expansion of existing service? Will be there opportunity for community partners, increased participation and supporting? So, Anne, as Renee indicated, we're not going to talk about the things that were not funded. Those are sort of included at the end of the deck for reference. They're also on the website from the September webinars. The information is out there. The decks are out there. DPs are posted on our website and OFM's website. If community partners want to pick up and lean into those elements and talk with their lawmakers and their friends about those, who are we to say no? But at this point, we're going to focus on what is in the governor's budget as we move forward. If there are specific questions about operationalizing that, feel free to reach out offline, Anne, and we can connect you with the right subject matter expert to talk about the nuts and bolts of some of those DPs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Renee to pivot to the child welfare, the prevention and the child welfare space.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Yes. So I'll begin with prevention. We had submitted a request for community-based prevention resources. And of this request, we received funding in the governor's proposed budget for the plan of safe care. The plan of safe care, this supports our pregnant people with SUD and substance exposed infants. This falls under the governor's priority of continuing to address the opioid the opioid pandemic. I also want to note that prevention, and talking about prevention, this is really prevention from entering in and becoming involved with the child welfare system. So, okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Combined in-home services, quality improvement, and positive Indian parenting. The governor's proposed budget includes funding to implement the positive Indian parenting program. This program is an 8 to 10 week parent education program. It was developed by the National Indian Child Welfare Association. It is DCYF's goal to reduce the number of American Indian, Alaska Native children who are placed in out-of-home care. It is also our priority to provide some additional supports culturally responding to the needs of the American Indian, Alaska Native families. So the governor proposed budget includes this, and this also helps us to meet our federal ICWA requirements. That's very important as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Our commercially and sexually exploited youth. Funding here was provided in the governor's proposed budget for us to comply with Senate Bill 6006. This requires us, DCYF, to use a validated screening tool to screen children and youth for commercial sexual abuse and integrate labor traffic laws. And we received 2 FTEs for this very important work. We also received funding for a position to assist us in locating missing tribal youth. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. This one noted as yes, mostly funded. The governor's proposed budget includes funding for us to continue to address the needs that our young people have as they're transitioning from systems of care and transitioning into adulthood. So we received investment in our independent living as well as LifeSet models. The independent living, this is a voluntary program. It's available to youth ages 15 to 22 who have been involved in the child welfare foster care system. These supports include employment assistance, education, daily living skills, vocational training, all very important as our young people are transitioning into adulthood. This funding was provided as one-time funding through this biennium of $750,000. So the governor's proposed budget provides this funding as ongoing. So again, it's maintaining the same level of access to service that we have today. Also received funding for the LifeSet model and program. This was developed by Youth Villages. This is available to our 17 and 22-year-olds who have been involved in the foster care system, juvenile justice, other behavioral health systems. It's really to assist them in becoming independent, again, as they're transitioning into adulthood. This program has specialists that are assigned to engage with our young people one-on-one, and they meet with them regularly. They're available 24/7. They, again, help them with education and employment supports. They assist our young people in finding housing, and also assistance to improve their mental health and their well-being. So the governor's proposed budget includes funding to expand this to 2 additional counties, Clark County in fiscal year 26 and Pierce County in fiscal year 27. It's currently available in 6 counties. So this then expands this to now being available to 8 counties. So yes, very happy to see that investment included in the governor's proposed budget. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Our DS compliance, the governor provides funding for us to continue to meet the obligations of the settlement agreement. This is to eliminate the use of our hotel stays and night-to-night placements. So very, very important to our child welfare foster care youth. So some additional placements were funded and included in the governor's proposed budget. Emerging Adulthood Housing Program. This is available to our 16 to 20-year-old youth and young adults. The program supports youth who want to live more independently. And again, as with the adolescent services, to support them in transitioning to adulthood. Also includes investment for our group receiving care. This serves children who are 12 and under, or under the age of 12, and along with sibling groups. Also requiring an 85% acceptance rate with this service. Our group EPS receiving care, this serves youth ages 12 to 17, moderately high to high levels of need, also requiring 85% acceptance rate. Our intensive group receiving care, this serves our children ages 12 to 17 with the highest level of needs, absolute highest level, and therefore requiring 100% acceptance rate. Also, funding includes to offset the cost of lease facility placements. And then also includes funding for our legal fees and fiscal resources, all the things necessary to support this settlement agreement. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Other child welfare investments that are currently included in our budget, and this funding is continuous funding. So the Family Preservation Services rate, this funding was provided in our enacted budget. It was scheduled to end at the end of fiscal year 25. And so this now in the governor's proposed budget makes this funding ongoing. So ongoing even beyond the 25-27 biennium that we're about to enter into. So excited to see that investment. The basic foster care rate. This rate was included in the 24 supplemental budget that the legislature had passed in what we refer to in budget technical terms as the outlook. So it was included there, but the funding technically wasn't provided to us. So we had submitted sort of a technical correction decision package requesting this funding. So this funding was included in the governor's proposed budget. It is phased in considering the budget deficit that we're currently in, providing half of that funding in fiscal year 26 and then phasing that in through fiscal year 29. The intercept model, this funding is included in our budget through fiscal year 26. So the governor's proposed budget includes this funding through the end of the biennium through fiscal year 27. The Pierce County Prevention Pilot, again, this was funding included in our budget. And so the governor's budget includes funding for the newborn home visiting program in Pierce County to continue through the biennium. The Rising Strong model in Spokane, again, governor's proposed budget includes this funding through the biennium. It's a residential treatment program serving holistically the entire family. So happy to see that investment as well included in the governor's proposed budget. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And with that, we are at our early learning investment. So I will turn it over to Allison to walk us through these.
Great. Thanks, Renee. And as folks may or may not be aware, early learning had some significant investments come due based on current law. And so you saw DCYF put forward pretty robust packages in this space based on current law, this being one of them. The governor's budget related to eligibility. The governor's budget opts to delay the expanded eligibility for Working Connections child care until fiscal year 30. So delays that a few years, but does fund the dual language rate increase and funds outreach dollars to focus on outreach for currently eligible families to continue to engage more families in using Working Connections childcare. So this is a partially funded decision package. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The other prong, if you will, or leg of the stool for early learning funding is around rates and base rate increases. The governor's budget fully funds the request of the agency and what's outlined as required under current law for rate increases for childcare providers. I want to be clear that this decision package contemplates center-based care, and the family childcare rate increases are included in the collective bargaining agreement that is negotiated between the state and family childcare providers with our partners at SEIU 925. But both are, the CBA obviously is funded in the budget, and the rate increase for centers, which will bring us to the 85th percentile, or bring providers to the 85th percentile of the current market rate survey. So despite all the realities, excited to see continued investment in rate increases here for childcare providers. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Additionally, last year, shortly after the legislature left town, the feds adopted some new Child Care Development Fund rules and rule changes. And so to come into compliance with those rules, they're going to take additional state investment because our state spending outpaces what we currently get from the feds in our block grant dollars. So you see a number of components here. This decision package, although says mostly funded, would consider fully funded. The delta here, or the difference, is largely technical in the fluidity of caseloads and forecasts, et cetera. So this is a nearly fully funded DP. It does fund all of the elements we requested that would bring us into compliance with the child care development new rules. That includes clarifying the 12-month authorization for families, aligning subsidy payments with the private market. So prospective pay and enrollment-based pay So rather than a reimbursement system, this is about paying upfront based on enrollment rather than attendance at the end of the month. This is how the private childcare market works for those of us who have recently experienced that joy. In addition, the make some changes and tweaks to overpayments, and then again that outreach dollars, right? We really want to invest in some outreach to continue to expand use of Working Connection for that currently eligible population. So excited to report that this decision package was mostly but largely fully funded. All the components of that were funded. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the other big prong, if you will, in early learning is ECAP. And ECAP entitlement was coming due per law. The governor chooses to delay ECAP entitlement until the 2030-31 school year, but does invest in a rate increase for ECAP providers, a partial rate increase of what we had requested, but an 18% slot rate increase in fiscal year 26. In addition, the governor's budget does move forward with conversion. So some part day slots converted to full day slots, and then additional full day slots added in fiscal year 27. So we continue to make progress and move forward in ECAP expansion despite the current reality and times. So with that, I will turn it back over to Renee to walk through what I call the more glamorous parts of state government.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Allison. Okay, we had submitted a decision package for risk mitigation, and included in this request, what was funded in the governor's proposed budget was one FTE, one very important FTE. This FTE will serve on our critical incident review team, and these reviews, the results of them will help us as a department to improve our practice and improve our policies, et cetera, in doing our work. So very important here. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So our CWIS system, this is our comprehensive child welfare information system. This is a case management system, and child welfare funding had been provided through the current fiscal year 25. So this funding allows this work to continue to develop this information technology system, this case management system. Implementation of it is not expected until fiscal year 30. So this is a very long process as you're building an entirely new child welfare case management system. But again, just very, very critical to us. And it'll also allow us to, once it's implemented, draw down FFPSA, which is a form of Title IV prevention dollars. So it'll provide us with the data necessary to be able to claim those federal dollars, as well as provide technically necessary casework for our social workers, the ability for them to perform the casework. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Also just wanted to note here that included in the governor's proposed budget is staffing investments from our collective bargaining agreements. State employees will be receiving a 3% increase effective July 1st of 2025, as well as a 2% increase July 1st of 2026. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm not going to go over these in any sort of detail, but just wanted to note that also within the collective bargaining agreement, there was specific classifications bargained for salary adjustments, as well as facility premium pay, shift premium pay, that again was collectively bargained and included in the governor's proposed budget. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the governor's proposed budget includes some reductions. As I noted at the very beginning of this webinar, we're in a budget deficit, and the goal really was to take the most harmless reductions. We, DCYF, as well as other cabinet agencies, were directed by the Office of Financial Management to submit an assignment in mid-November of reduction options. And so what I'm about to go through with you today and what was included in the governor's proposed budget are reductions that we as an agency had put forward and are therefore included. So just wanted to note that we did, DCYF, put these forward in light of that assignment. So the first is our CSEC receiving centers. We have a proviso, something that's directing us in our budget bill to open 2 receiving centers. However, that funding is not sufficient to open those receiving centers. So either we needed more funding to open those receiving centers, or they could be taken as a reduction, as an underspend. We're not able to utilize the current funding as it exists in the enacted budget right now. So that was taken as underspend and included as a reduction in our budget. combined in-home services. I just want to clarify on this one. Right now, holistically, our combined in-home services that prevent children from entering into foster care, we are essentially holistically at budget in our combined in-home services. But when we look at these line item by line item, there are some that are underspent. And so we as an agency need to right size. Once we right size these line item services within our budget, and just to be completely candid and transparent, where we are seeing that overspend is in our concrete goods. And so if we can right size what we are funded to, then we would have some underspend in our combined in-home services. So that was also taken as underspend. Referrals and transitions in our DS settlement agreement. This is right sizing. I would classify this as, yes, it's underspend, but it's right sizing our budget. Our need is being met for the DS settlement agreement. We essentially have more funding than what we need for this particular area. So taking that as an underspend. AGO underspend, the Attorney General's office. This essentially was redundant funding, if you will. We had an area in our budget where we received funding, and then this was also being funded through the mechanism in which we receive funding for our Attorney General services. So that was taken as underspend, but again, legal obligation representation is being fully met. Sexually aggressive youth underspend. This is a true underspend. So that is being captured as well and taken as a reduction. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Administrative efficiencies in good faith. We had offered up that we can take some reduction, or not that we can, but that we're willing to. Don't want to just take all of our underspend and reductions in services. So in good faith, offered that up as well. We don't have any particular administrative efficiencies or reductions in mind, but just wanted to offer that up. So that was also included and taken in the governor's proposed budget. ECAP underspend, we do have 845 unfilled part-day slots. So therefore, considering they're unfilled, that underspend was also included. The consolidated seasonal childcare, this is one where, again, in a portion of our budget, in the budget bill, we have funding for seasonal childcare. However, this is being currently captured in our Working Connections childcare forecast. So still fully meeting the need in this area and taking that as an underspend. Our CCDF TANF audit resolution, our state auditor's office requires us to meet certain requirements for these grants. And so we received funding to do so. We anticipated that we would need to contract out some of this in order to meet the requirements. And as it turns out, we found a solution that is less costly, and we don't need to contract out some of that work and keeping it in-house. And therefore, this is a savings or an underspend, if you will, and also therefore taken and included in the governor's proposed budget. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Oh, and I guess that was it. I was on a roll there.
You were ready to keep going.
Yes. Yeah. So Allison and I will stay on for a few minutes for questions, and just want to thank everyone for your partnership. But yes, Allison, please go ahead.
A few questions in. There's one about CSEC receiving centers related to the underspend. So does taking this item as a reduction mean there's now zero funding to operate these facilities, or how does this reduction impact the existent? So a couple of things. I want to remind folks, this is a proposed budget. But currently DCYF does have $1 million in their budget to operate 2 CSEC receiving centers. They have never come to fruition. We believe because the funding is too low. We have put it out to bid multiple times. It has not been successful to come to fruition. So there are not CSEC receiving centers in existence to date, unfortunately. And so this, one of our asks was about increasing that funding level, but because that funding level could not be increased, the option, the logical option that made sense was to remove this underspend. And so it means we will stop, if enacted, we will stop procuring or attempting to stand up these receiving centers. There is a question around, so a question on FFPSA, Renee, that I don't know if you'll be able to answer. If not, we'll follow up. How many dollars are being left on the federal table annually as a state related to FFPSA? Not sure we're prepared to answer that today.
Yeah, no, I think we need to follow up. And there's also going to be, once we have a CWIS system in place, there's what we have in place today. And then there's also an opportunity as we implement new prevention strategies and programs and services and such that we could claim FFPSA for those. So there's sort of two levels of claiming what we're currently doing and what we can do in the future. But yes, we would need to follow up on that.
Great. There's a question re-ECAP. Does having unfilled part-day slots imply the need for full-day slots? Nicole, I think that's an interesting hypothesis. I think we can't draw a conclusion there. I think there's a variety of factors that contribute to unfilled slots, be it part-day or school day, family choice, availability, workforce challenges, etc. DCYF has taken a position in years prior and will continue to that school day is the right approach when it comes to entitlement, given the dosage and duration research and what we know working families need. And so I don't know that it's appropriate or prudent to draw a conclusion there, but it is a hypothesis that is worth exploration for sure. Question related to the underspend related to sexually aggressive youth. Or I guess this is a statement. Thank you, Karen, for your comments. There is a question around to clarify, is there a cut in concrete goods for families? I think this relates to that underspend conversation related to combined in-home. Renee, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, essentially, it is going to result in reducing what we're currently providing today in concrete goods. We're overspending our concrete goods, essentially like budgeted amount. We are overspending that now. And so we will need to reduce that in order to come in on budget.
Great. And then Lori, I think that answers your question around the concrete goods. We can certainly follow up with more concrete goods conversation as we pivot to conversations with the legislature. Is the link ready, available for recording? It is not, because we are still actively recording. And so as soon as we are done recording this, the team will take it down. They'll format it and we'll get it posted on the website. Again, it will likely take a couple of days to get it turned around and posted. It'll be on the DCYF Government Affairs webpage. Happy to stick around for a few more questions, but that definitely concludes our comment. Oh, here's a question. Did you say combined in-home services and positive Indian parenting received 800,000-ish, 89, but asked for 14 million? So Renee, that relates to sort of that component of that combined in-home decision package where only that positive Indian parenting piece was funded in the governor's budget. There were other things we had asked for related to combined in-home services, but the piece that was funded was the positive Indian parenting piece. Happy to continue to stick around. Again, thanks for joining. It's great to be with you all. If there are follow-up questions or detailed questions or more information, please feel free to reach out to Renee or myself as we pivot back to the slide. Oh, there's a question. Can you pop the ECAP entitlement slide back up really quickly? Jessica, possible to click back to that one? Close your eyes as we move quickly through their slides here. There it is. There's the ECAP entitlement slide, Holly. And these, again, will be posted. Happy to do this. Thank you all for joining. It's great to be able to talk about what's out there. And again, I will just say as we part, I know folks are hopping off here. It's a complex year. It's a complex time. There's lots of change. And I am reminding myself that lots of things can be true at the same time. We can be disappointed in the overall revenue reality, but and disappointed in some of what the legislature is going to have to contemplate, but also really thankful for where DCYF is at in this proposed budget. It's a really strong budget for this agency. And that's a good thing for us as we head into, and selfishly, me personally, as I head into my work in Olympia full-time next week, being able to talk about the investments and the things the agency needs. You are welcome, Casey. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Thank you all for joining. I hope everyone has a terrific weekend, and please do reach out if there's any follow-up questions. Oh, remind me when we'll know if these proposals will be adopted. Yeah, just logistically, the legislature starts on Monday. They run for 105 days. So really, in theory, they should be concluded by the end of April. But there are touch points along the way and cut points, if you will, where we know bills will be moving. We'll see proposed budgets in late March, early April, and then they'll wrap up all of their business by the end of April. So we'll know for sure, fingers crossed, at the end of April, but there'll be indications along the way. Renee and I will join you for another webinar in late March, early April, after we see proposed budgets from the House and Senate. So we'll keep folks updated as we go. We'll send out updates. My team's available for questions, etc. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks everyone.